You are listening to the Bureau Chiefs with Michael Serapio, a primetime politics podcast from CPAC. Hello everyone, I'm Michael Serapio. Well, voters in the Montreal riding of Terrebonne will be going back to the polls on Friday afternoon. The Supreme Court annulled last April's election results in that riding, meaning the Liberals have just lost another MP. Now, on election night, the riding of Terrebonne kept swinging between the Liberal and the Bloc Québécois candidates, with initial results declaring a Liberal victory by 25 votes. But when the counts were validated, the seat flipped and the BQ incumbent was declared the winner by 44 votes. That triggered an official recount, and again the seat flipped once again, declaring Liberal Tatiana Auguste once again the new MP by one vote. The results were taken to court by the BQ, that also found one voter who says her mail-in ballot was not counted because of a postal error. The case going all the way to the Supreme Court, and that brings us to today on Friday and the decision to annul the results. Well, with that, let's bring in the Bureau Chiefs. Robert Fife is the Ottawa Bureau Chief for the Globe and Mail. We also have Tonda MacCharles, the Ottawa Bureau Chief for the Toronto Star, and Joël-Denis Bellavance, Ottawa Bureau Chief for La Presse. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Michael.
So, here we have a government that has been trying to build a majority without necessarily going to the polls. They've been trying to pick up, floor crossers. We saw two. And now comes this ruling from the Supreme Court that annuls the results in Terrebonne. How bad is this for the government, Bob?
Well, we're going to have 3 by-elections now, because we have the seat that Krista Freeland gave up, as well as Bill Blair was going off to the High Commissioner. Now we have this decision. I'm pretty sure that the ones in Scarborough and in Rosedale, which are the 2 Toronto ridings, are probably pretty safe for the Liberals. I'm not sure what the playground is in Quebec. That had been a long time PQ riding, and it just flipped by one vote for the Liberals. I don't know whether Mr. Carney has the coattails to be able to win that riding. So it's going to be really interesting to see whether he can pull it off. And if he doesn't, I think we're going to have a situation where the Prime Minister is going to have to decide whether he tries to stick with the strong minority government, because it looks like he can't pull enough Conservatives over, or whether we have a spring election.
Mm-hmm. Tonda?
I mean, in the short term, it slightly changes the math for the Liberals in the House of Commons, and so but they still, as a minority, need cooperation from the other side to draw from it wherever they can to get things through. But we're seeing this week, that it looks like there's going to be less resistance. They've reached a deal now on moving forward with the Conservatives on the GST credit, the grocery credit that was brought in, and to bring that back to the House, that got royal assent rather, but to bring the Budget Implementation Act through committee quickly and back into the House quickly. So I expect you're going to see, as a result of kind of this still tentative minority situation, the Liberals making a few more concessions to the Conservatives. So in the short term, it doesn't change anything in Parliament right away. They still have to negotiate with the other side. In the bigger picture, Bob's right. What does it say about the Liberals' chances in Quebec, where I think, frankly, Carney's trade efforts have been met with pretty positive reviews?
Mm-hmm. Joël-Denis?
Well, this story is a bit of a roller coaster, as you mentioned. It flipped many times. It's flipped again. It's the first time that the Supreme Court of Canada renders such a decision, cancelling an election that was held a year ago. Now, my sense is that it's going to be a tough battle between the Liberals and the Bloc Québécois, but Mr. Carney's his reputation is still very much strong in Quebec. He's seen as the adult in the House of Commons, but also in Canada as in general, facing Donald Trump. And so I would predict that the Liberals have a good chance of keeping that seat, especially that since Mr. Carney has put forward policies that will benefit the economy in the long term, and people understand that we're in a tough spot and we need some kind of stability. So I expect the Liberals to do quite well and even keep that seat, even though they won by they had won that election by 1 seat and now lost it by the result.
But she gets to run again if she wants to, with having had 8 months of basically incumbency and some profile there too, because the Prime Minister has put her forward on a couple of occasions to highlight her presence, her win initially. So yeah, she enters whatever by-election gets held with an advantage.
Exactly, and in the by-election calls, you can expect ministers, key ministers in Quebec, Mélanie Joly, François-Philippe Champagne, who are very good campaigns, to be there to try to keep that seat for the Liberals.
That riding is going to have a lot of Liberal money flowing in there.
And visitors.
Well, but let me pick up on the point that you were making, Bob, because I hear what you're saying, that Quebecers may be happy with the economic decisions and the proclamations made by the Prime Minister, but is that a long enough coattail to carry a riding where even at its widest margin was 44 votes as it went back and forth between the BQ and the Liberals?
I think so. I think so, because now the proof is more and more in the pudding, and the pudding that people see from Quebec is a very delicious one, if I may say, if we talk about food. But
but I think it also, it bears watching that riding for how the BQ plays out the separatist line of argument
that's a good point.
In a campaign, right?
That's a very good point.
I'll be watching for that.
Yeah,
I think there's a larger issue here. Mark Carney is 29 percentage points ahead of Pierre Poilievre as preferred Prime Minister. The Liberal Party is around 5 to 9%, depending on which poll, now ahead of the Conservatives, which is a significant change from the last a few months when they've been, or last year actually, when they've been sort of neck and neck in terms of the party. And this is a Prime Minister who wants to get things done. And he hasn't shown an over-willingness to try to cooperate with other parties. The Conservatives, for the last year after the election campaign, have not been cooperative at all. After Christmas, with these poll numbers, all of a sudden, Pierre Poilievre is talking about, let's cooperate with the government on legislation and on issues. And that's largely because he's fearful that there's going to be an election campaign. Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, had a meeting with Carney, and he's saying, pull the plug. The numbers are going in your favor, and it'll only get worse because who knows what's going to happen with the negotiations with the United States on continental free trade. The economy is still funny. We've got potentially separatism in Quebec, a separatist or a referendum in Alberta. There's lots of things in play here. And one thing we know about the Liberals, I'll quote Alan McEachern back from the 1980s when they defeated Joe Clark. He said this, Jim Coots in his diary, do you think we're power hungry? And then he answered it himself. You're damn right we're power hungry.
Okay.
In a future by-elections in Terrebonne, it will be interesting to see how the national unity issue plays out. Whether the Parti Québécois will be campaigning with Bloc Québécois candidates in that riding. And that could be, something that pushed back the support for the Bloc Québécois. And that would say, if you play the national unity card, you've got Mélanie Joly and François-Philippe Champagne going there, the Liberals have a good chance to keeping it.
Okay, listen, so we'll watch what happens, the fallout, by-elections, possible early election. You mentioned trade and the fact that is this bouncing ball that's hard to follow. And we have, as of this weekend, ministers, as well as parliamentary secretaries. We're going to have delegates, businesses heading down to Mexico, several cities in Mexico, trying to drum up more trade with essentially the third amigo, right? But we have actually had a free trade agreement with Mexico since the 90s, since NAFTA was signed back in 1992. From a number I saw cited, Canada-Mexico trade only accounts for less than 3% of overall trade that the countries actually engage in. So what needs to be conquered here? Yes, deals and negotiations to be had, but there seems to be something in the way that has prevented, across 3 decades, Canada and Mexico coming closer when it comes to striking trade deals.
It's called the
350 million Americans.
It's called the U.S. That's what restricts trade between Canada and Mexico. For Mexico and Canada, the U.S. is the bigger market, the more easily accessed market. The infrastructure works that way, and so it's the elephant that eats up everything. I don't think that's a big mystery. And one of the things that they've been exploring for months now, is how to increase infrastructure, port infrastructure, rail infrastructure, what have you, to allow more goods to be shipped back and forth between Mexico and Canada. But look, that's going to require a whole lot of business willingness, political goodwill to happen, directing money towards that trade-enabling infrastructure. And also, I think this isn't just about deals. I think it's also about trying to build a constituency of allies with Canada in advance of the trilateral pact talks, the renewal talks on the USMCA/CUSMA/ whatever Mexico calls it, right? So, they're trying to build business ties, but also political ties.
And picking up on what Tonda is saying, they're looking at direct routes from Canada to Mexico, namely through the ports. And that's why you saw the expansion announcement on Contrecoeur, the Port of Montreal in Contrecoeur, to increase, the capacity, so that would be direct routes from Canada to Mexico. And they're looking at the other way as well from Vancouver, and also through railroads. I didn't know that, but you've got Canadian companies owning railroads all through the U.S. that can go out directly to Mexico. This is also a possibility. So through railroads and ports, that's what they're looking at. But now going to Mexico is also a signal that Canada wants to send with Mexico to the United States, that those two countries will be sticking together in the coming talks to review CUSMA.
Yeah, let me pick up on that point. How important is this mission?
Well, I think the reason has less to do with the trade routes and a far more important showing of unity between the Mexicans and the Canadians, because the Americans have made it very clear, Jameson Greer, the U.S. Trade Representative and U.S. Treasury Secretary as well, that they want to split the Canada and the Mexico off, so it's not trilateral negotiations, but they can play one off against the other. And the Canadians and the Mexicans are not stupid. They can see what game the Americans are trying to play. And symbolically, this is really important that you have senior ministers from the government and senior business leaders going down there, meeting their Mexican counterparts and trying to say, look, we've got to stick together because the bully in the White House is going to try to beat us all up.
And by the way, this is the fourth visit by Canadians to Mexico in the last 6 months. You had Prime Minister Carney in September. You had Dominique Leblanc, who was there also in December. The Governor General, Mary Simon, just came back from Mexico. And now again, Mr. Leblanc. So there's a lot of efforts to bring those two countries together, have the same strategy, if I may say.
And notwithstanding all the Canadians who are not going to the southern United States anymore, they're going to holiday
they're going to
Mexico.
Exactly. So finding hotels might be difficult for Dominique Leblanc.
Okay, well, we'll see how that goes. Well, they're spread across several cities in Mexico. They're all going to Mexico City. So we'll see how that works out. But listen, you all mentioned trade with the United States. And, of course, a key player these many years helping navigate the unpredictable waters that is Washington, D.C. these days has been Canadian Ambassador to the U.S., Kirsten Hillman. Her time officially comes to an end on Sunday, taken over by the incoming Canadian Ambassador to D.C., Mark Wiseman. Before Ms. Hillman's time is done, I'm wondering if you had words to share about what you think her contribution has been to that office and to this country.
Well, first of all, she's been an outstanding ambassador, and not only in terms of negotiation, the European-Canada Free Trade Agreement, but the helping to negotiate the new USMCA or CUSMA, whatever name you want to have for it,
let's call
and
it
then
Tonda.
trying to handle the last year, the first year of the second Trump presidency. From a personal perspective, as a journalist, I have a great deal of respect for her because she would pick up the phone and speak to you on background and provide you with really good information. And sometimes she'd say, like, don't report this right now, this can't be reported, which is fine, but it brought you into the loop to kind of understand what was going on behind the scenes. I wish we had more senior officials and diplomats who would be as open and as trusting with Canadian media as she has been. I have a feeling that Mark Wiseman probably is not going to be like that, but let's pray that he is. But I doubt it.
Okay.
And
I would say that all of that is those are some of her many qualities. I think that one of the very big strengths she brought to the table was that she was a trade lawyer. at heart, a negotiator. She knew trade deals up and down, tariff rate quotas up and down the yin-yang. She negotiated Canada's entry into the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which was the key Trans-Pacific trade deal encompassing a whole bunch of nations that the U.S. never actually ended up joining, China is outside of. And she brought all that knowledge to the NAFTA renegotiation in the first Trump term, and then to this last chaotic year. And I think that the federal government will miss her counsel greatly, but hopefully she'll be on the other end of the phone for Mark Wiseman, because she's got a lot to offer.
Yeah, and she was an effective communicator in French and in English.
That's
so
right.
we got, in Quebec, got to deal with a lot. We saw her very often giving interviews in French, but also she was one of the rare diplomats in Washington that didn't have any political affiliation. In the past, they would name premiers like Frank McKenna or Gary Dewar, or Michael Wilson, former finance minister, or Derek Burney before that, who had very, very much political affiliation. She did not, but she served the country so well by the depth of her knowledge and the skill of her negotiations skills. So kudos to Madame Hulin.
Yeah, she's nonpartisan. I mean, Stephen Harper invited her to the unveiling of his official portrait. I mean, she couldn't come because she was too busy, but that just gives you an example.
And she was effective at across the aisle negotiations with both Democrats and Republicans in the U.S. She went to the political conventions. She got VIP seating at both the Republican and the Democratic conventions with key players, and was in rooms with key players, all of which she brought to the table for Canada's benefit.
There was this week there was a picture of her with Democratic and Republican senators who had held an event to thank her for her contributions to Canada-U.S. relations. That's pretty rare.
And so she showed that Canada can have strong diplomatic relationship with the United States, strong diplomatic representation. So Madame Hillman, I think, will go into the history books as a very capable woman career diplomat.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, many Canadians not knowing her name owe her a great deal of thanks for all the work that she's done in D.C. Listen, before we are done, before we move on to the yeas and the nays, forewarning. That's for Tonda. Listen,
what happened on Monday?
Yeah, exactly. Listen, before we get there, though, I do want to, be a bit more solemn about this, because we do need to talk about Tumbler Ridge. At the time of this taping, we are awaiting the Prime Minister as well as the leaders of the Conservative, the Bloc, the NDP, the Green parties to take part in a vigil in Tumbler Ridge. The Governor General will also be in attendance. So we'll have that and we'll see that. And as I open this topic up, I want to acknowledge that the priority here has to be the families who have lost children, have lost loved ones. The two children that are fighting for their lives in Vancouver area hospitals right now, the fact that the community is in grief, and I don't want to be disrespectful to that process, but I do want to note from the political point that we have here in Ottawa, we saw something this week that is rarely on display in this country at a time when politics can be incredibly hyper-partisan. Instead, we saw the political leaders try to step up, share words to convey to Tumbler Ridge and to those affected the grief of a nation. And I'm wondering if you might share a little bit of your reflections of this incredibly sad, a huge tragedy, but also this unique and distinct moment here in Ottawa this past week, Bob.
Well, look, I think all the leaders rose to the occasion with very heartfelt, sincere comments on what had unfolded. For me, what struck me the most was watching in the House of Commons as members of Parliament, all sides of the House, men and women, were crying and wiping tears away because they have children or grandchildren who it shook everybody. And frankly, I was sitting in my office watching this and fighting back tears myself. So to me, that was the moment. To me, what captured the moment were the members of Parliament shedding tears.
I mean, to be honest, I don't think that it's a rare thing in Parliament. I think actually when there are moments of national tragedy, Parliament always comes together. And politicians do give voice to a nation's sorrow. And I think that the people and the families of Tumbler who saw that this week in their politicians and national leaders would have derived some comfort, I hope, from those words and that unity. But really, to give credit to the MPs across all parties, I have in my many years on the Hill seen this time and time again, especially when it involves massive national tragedies, whether it was the Portapique shooting, whether it was the slaying of Mounties in Mayerthorpe, whether it was a school shooting in Taber, Alberta, many, many years ago. I remember when Polytechnique massacre happened. And so I think time and again, our national parliament is a venue and a voice for the nation's feelings, sorrows, and joys when we have them.
JD?
I would say that the leadership rose to the occasion. They were trying to console a nation that is in tears right now, still is, I think. We'll have a vigil tonight, and they were trying their best to not themselves, let the tears flow, trying to get, the right words at the right moment to console a nation that is really stricken by grief, and I think they rose to the occasion. And so I think that this is a moment that that should also teach us a lesson, that there is politics for a moment, but there is a moment to grief, and this is a moment to grief right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, as I say, thank you for the reflections, and I don't want to be disrespectful by asking that question, because at the end of the day, there's still people that are suffering, and they will be for quite some time. So to Tumbler Ridge, to people who may be hearing this, certainly amongst the four of us, if you allow me, our thoughts are with you.
Absolutely.
Okay. Let's move on. On to now our yays and our nays. And Bob, I'll begin with you. Your yays and nays of the week.
Well, I'm going to go with the yays first, which is the 5 police officers and who went into that school. They had no idea how many people were in there, how well armed they were, but they went in, and they were very brave. And I wanted to also to thank the first responders who had to follow those police officers in to take those young bodies out and try to save people's lives.
Yeah. May I add also the teachers?
And the
happened
teachers,
at the school,
yes,
right?
the teachers, yes.
We trust our children to the teachers.
Absolutely.
And they stepped up in that moment.
Yeah.
Any nays?
I guess the Conservative MP, Mike Dawson, who was grandstanding about the fact that there was a pay hike for MPs and he wants to return it. He knows full well that the way the legislation is that you cannot return this. If he really cared about this, he would have said, look, I'm just going to give my raise to charity. He didn't do that. It was all grandstanding.
Mm-hmm. Tonda?
I think, so nays first, trying to remember the beginning of this week was also a time when, once again, we saw the disruption and chaos that results from the White House in the threats that were used against the country and the bridge, the threat to close down a bridge without any sort of real understanding about the cross-national effort that's gone into making that bridge possible. And so my nay goes there for the week. My yays, I echo what Bob said about the Mounties and who went in and all the first responders and educators. The story actually of what the teachers did to protect students there every time, right? It's a big one. So
it's hard.
My yays goes to all the political leaders for rising to the moment that we went through this week. So Prime Minister Mark Carney, Conservative Party Leader Pierre Poilievre, Yves-François Blanchet de Bloc Québécois, les deux, Don Davies, who spoke for the NDP, and Madame Elisabeth May for the Green Party. And they're all going together to the vigil tonight. So that's a show of national unity, leadership at a moment of crisis. So I praise them for that. That's my yay. And my nay goes to Donald Trump for threatening to, or saying that China would seize the Stanley Cup from us. How dare you? At the moment where we're fighting for a medal for the Olympics in hockey, that's my big nay, and I think it could be a permanent nay for Mr.
Trump. we may have to rule him out of the running week to week. Okay, listen, Parliament is on break next week, but still, I'm wondering if you have anything as we now switch topics over to the look ahead, Bob.
Well, first of all, Donald Trump has not even issued any heartfelt condolences to the people the victims in that shooting, which he's the only world leader, as far as I know, that hasn't done that.
Yeah.
I guess, what other outrage is this man going to do in the coming days? Because it seems never to stop.
I'm going to look ahead to, they canceled as a result of all the tragedy unfolding in BC, the release of the Defence Industrial Strategy. So that we're still waiting on. We reported out a couple of details on it this week, that they're going to be picking certain winners to champion in the process. Canadian companies who would be able to benefit from a government boost in defence contracting. But I think also there are a whole bunch of sort of moving pieces on the trade file that I'm looking at, and when will we see the Supreme Court of the United States rule on tariffs? We saw last week Congress rule against them, but that was more something that Trump can veto. So that there's very much a lot at play there, and with the Mexican trip on, maybe it might sort of tweak Mr. Trump to sort of advance some views on where Canada and Mexico sit right now in the trade talks.
So the industrial defense policy should be released on Tuesday, so I'll be watching for that, because the details, will be very important, and it's supposed to be a U-turn from our dependency from the United States. We'll see which industry will be rising up from those investments that are coming, and it's interesting that it's following up the auto industry, and there might be some link between the two, because Ottawa is urging some auto manufacturers to switch to the military component. So that is something I'll be watching. And also the trade mission from Dominique Leblanc. Will he be smoking cigars with his Mexican counterparts? That's something to watch.
Drinking tequila.
Well, listen, I don't drink. We'll see. Okay. Listen, thank you as always, Bob, Tonda, and Joël-Denis. Thank you for that. And that has been the Bureau Chiefs with Michael Serapio, a primetime politics podcast from CPAC. Thank you for watching. We'll speak to you next time.